человек, который на протяжении многих лет руководил бизнес-школой
of the Rotterdam Business School, was the chair of this school, one of the most powerful in Europe, and then head of Bentley University in the United States, Mark Page. And I think we will have a very interesting discussion today. So now I would like to give the floor to the main moderator of our today's session, the founder of the Judge Business School, Cambridge University, President of AMBA International Association of MBA International Association, Sir Paul.
The founder of Judge Business School, Cambridge University, to the President of AMBA International, the moderator of our session, to Sir Paul Judge.
Very good. You did perfect.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this session. I've been a great believer for many years in the importance of professionalism in leadership and management. There are those who ask, can leadership be taught? Is it innate? Well, my experience is it certainly can be learnt. And there's a lot of evidence that people who have leadership experiences early on in life, at school or college or whatever, turn out to be better leaders. And we've been too ready to allow people to lead large organizations without any real training, either at a business school or elsewhere. And yet we know that people who run large organizations can have as much effect on the communities in which they operate as can other people, doctors or lawyers or architects who we wouldn't allow to practice unless they were trained. And the ethics and effectiveness of those leaders is very important. Now, we obviously live in a fast-changing world. Firstly, as we all know, technology moving very quickly. And secondly, globalization, partly because of technology and partly because of greater affluence that people are able to move around the world more easily. And so all organizations now have to compete against people around the globe. And in the end, whether you're fighting a war, sadly, or trying to gain market share, whether it's for a country or a company, in the end, competition is between workforces. And that is why leadership is increasingly important. You have to have leaders to overcome the inertia of organizations. Organizations left on their own without leadership will just sort of go along a bit, but they won't do anything very exciting, they won't change very much, and they will gradually disappear and be taken over or competed against. And people also nowadays do not like to be managed. They'd like to be led. They'd much rather have a leader than a manager. And that's why leadership also is very important. We don't want totally extrovert leaders who are rushing around all the time as if they're in a panic, because having a panic all the time is not a good way to run an organization. But measured leadership, giving a strong direction, providing a framework, listening to people, all of those things are very important. And a leader can see both the wood and the trees. That's an English expression that means you can see the wood, the total picture, and the trees, the individual parts of the picture. And you do need, as a leader, to be able to see both. You mustn't get bogged down in the details, but you mustn't just operate as if from a helicopter without seeing what is actually going on. And in the end, it's leadership that gives the heartbeat to an organization. Just like your own heart keeps your body going, a leader provides the heartbeat for the organization. And as Charles Darwin said, a great Cambridge graduate, of course, he said, the fittest survive. And that is true. It's true of animals, but it's true of organizations. And a key part of an organization is the head, the leader. So this afternoon we're here to discuss leadership in the context of academia and of business schools, and of how we should all try to work together to make our organizations better than previously. So it's my great privilege to invite Michael Page, firstly, to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Paul. I must say, when I was given the topic and it included the title Collaborative Leadership, I wasn't quite sure what that was. I tend to, when I'm thinking of these kind of titles, is to say, well, if there's collaborative leadership and it's defined, what is the opposite? And the polar opposite, I guess, would be uncollaborative leadership, and I'm not sure that that's leadership at all. So let me start by saying that I suspect as we go through the panel, there will be considerable discussion about business schools and what they need to remain relevant and to produce the kind of leaders that the world is not only seeking, but that the world desperately needs. And I think that discussion about business schools will inevitably lead to discussions about whether schools have the capacity to adapt and transform at the rate that is required. There will be a discussion about fragmentation of traditional degrees and how do we educate people when they're looking for shorter interventions through their working careers. There will be discussions about connectedness with the real world and whether business schools, certainly university-based business schools, continue to be too esoteric and too absent from adequate connection with the so-called real world of work. There will be discussions about the changing nature of the student body, the fact that our traditional domain of the young, inexperienced, even with MBAs, is shifting more and more towards the mature learner looking to extend their education. There will be discussions about what technology is doing and how we need to use it effectively to become more efficient and as a medium and content of our education agendas. Globalization is clearly something we cannot ignore, and equally when we think about globalization, we have to recognize that as institutions, we are going to be more and more called upon to collaborate with the dissimilar rather than collaborate with the clones, which is something we've been very good at for decades. And lastly, but by no means least, we will have discussions about the nature of academic research and the challenge that we continue to face in the dominant group of schools with the fixation of faculty, the fixation, I might say, in spite of public statements of accreditations to drive towards discipline-based traditional scholarship that is not as real-world problem-oriented as we need, and that will develop the kind of leaders we seek. So with these assumptions, and without wishing to influence the thought processes of my colleagues, I hope to take a slightly different tack. Undeniably, I believe the current dialogue concerning tertiary education, both business education and more broadly, is dominated by employability concerns. Initially, this concern of it was driven by the notion or the acceptance of the increased cost of education and of the need for a return on investment. I think this dialogue has been elevated in sophistication by moving to a reference not to employability directly, but to relevance, impact, and innovation. Just this month, University Business had a feature article suggesting that college student success will become the focus of state and federal policy in the United States because higher education has entered the era of accountability. Well, what does this mean for us as education institutions? Simply that government and the general public are predicted to demand more transparency in the data released by our organizations as to how our graduates, pre-experience and post-experience, are faring in the job market. In other words, the policy pressure that is coming our way is a pressure that is oriented towards jobs and financial return on investment. Now, it's certainly not my intention to downplay the importance of these issues. However, I do believe that we're in danger of neglecting a larger, longer-term consequence of this kind of instrumental passion and attention. I say this because I'm developing an ever-hardening belief that wealth generation is not an end in itself. Growth does not ensure equality or justice. Technology supports a trend to decreasing median working weeks and consequent increased leisure or some substitute for leisure for the educated. Globalization is creating stronger weak networks and weakening strong networks that are local. This is increasing the potential that we're seeing in public dialogue, that we're seeing in elections and population expressions of discontent in public life around the world, where individuals are feeling more isolated and individuals are more and more seeking or searching for a local tribe to which they can belong. As so eloquently argued by Ghoshal, unlike the natural sciences, we in management education are both observers and actors, with the commensurate challenge that we create our own truth over time. Untrustworthy management expands when models of behavior and compensation rely on appeals to self-interest and to greedy economic actors. So, as we try to build and as we try to pay more attention to collaborative, or what I'd rather call responsible leadership, we need to recognize two important issues as hugely influential actors in the stage. First, the ever-increasing inequality of our world. There is little doubt that financial crises included, globalization has significantly increased global wealth. However, there is also considerable evidence that the distribution of wealth has not been equitable. The rich are becoming ever richer, the poor, certainly relatively and sometimes absolutely, are becoming poorer. The middle class is being squeezed out of contention as a dominant, stabilizing force in society. According to a 2011 OECD report, 21 out of 27 OECD countries have seen household income of the top decile increase at a faster rate than the bottom decile between the 1980s and the late 2000s. On average, the annual growth rate for the top decile was 50% faster than for the bottom decile. These are issues that really need to concern us, and these are issues that need to be in the thought processes of any collaborative, responsible leaders we create. Second, technology and globalization have greatly increased productivity and will continue to do so. Our ability to produce more products and services with less input, particularly human capital input, means that hours of full-time work for knowledge workers is declining. When we combine this with the recognition that manual workers in many parts of the world find themselves increasingly unemployed, then we must begin to appreciate that employment will increasingly need to be viewed within the context of broader human activity. Maybe some of you have the answer, but I must admit to be thoroughly confused by how Donald Trump is going to find jobs for all the currently employed middle state coal miners while he is simultaneously supporting the growth of the US fracking industry. To me, the one seems to ring the death knell of the other. We have seen an almost monotonic decline of working hours per year since the 1850s and the start of the Industrial Revolution, as well as a significant inverse relationship between productivity and working hours per week. Over the last 15 years, the annual working hours for workers, not including the unemployed, have declined further to around 1,700 hours for 47 Northern Hemisphere countries. Assuming 14 hours per day are devoted to sleep, sustenance, and getting to work, this still leaves more than 1,700 hours per worker not working. In a recent article in The Atlantic, the editor-in-chief discussed the decline of Youngstown with the collapse of its steel industry in the 1970s. Although a long time ago, the fallout continues to this day. Youngstown was transformed not only by economic disruption, but also by a psychological and cultural breakdown. Depression, spousal abuse, and suicide all became much more prevalent. The caseload of the area's mental health centers more than tripled within a decade. The city built 4 prisons in the mid-1990s, a rare growth industry in the town. As Bennett stated, Youngstown's story is America's story because it shows that when jobs go away, the cultural cohesion of a place is destroyed. Cultural breakdown matters even more than economic breakdown. So what does this mean for business schools and collaborative leadership? First and most importantly, we need to expand our understanding of the distinction between leadership and management. Leadership has generally been seen as management plus, where the plus is the ability to inspire others and induce them to enthusiastically pursue the goals of an organization as set out by the leader or leaders. Something that extends well beyond the effective allocation and controlling of resources that may be considered the domain of management. Leadership is about purpose. The question then is, what purpose? Wells Fargo and CEO John Stumpf certainly had a purpose when employees were pushed unrelentingly to increase accounts held per customer. In my opinion, whether the dictates were explicit or not, leadership certainly induced over 5,000 employees to engage in fraudulent practices that led to them being fired. However, expressing sorrow in front of a federal commission for conduct that, in his words, failed to fulfill our responsibilities to our customers, our team members, and the American public reflects the consequences of morally corrupt leadership rather than the absence of leadership. I might make the similar case about the installation of software designed to cheat emissions tests on diesel vehicles. Again, in spite of protestations of not knowing, while this might reflect a failure of management, it is not clear that this is a failure of leadership. Rather, it is the discovery of the consequences of the wrong type of leadership. Leadership that inspired senior personnel to believe that cheating was a viable option to achieving targets. How are we as business schools going to develop collaborative leadership to appropriately impact business, government, and society? To do this, we have to adjust to a number of realities. Student or client profile. Different schools will be dealing with different students, different executives. How do we engage with them? One size fits all will not work. Research. A return to the understanding that many forms of research have merit. Yes, perhaps too many academics are pursuing traditional academic research who have neither the resources nor the ability to do this. But that doesn't mean all academic research is esoteric and irrelevant. other forms of applied and connected transdisciplinary work that engages external stakeholders, corporate, government, civil society, must achieve recognition amongst the global accreditation bodies. And in this area, I believe they have a long way to go from espoused statements to reality in practice as to what they acknowledge as quality research. Stakeholder and client demands. Co-development has become the reality of our lives. Institutions increasingly face the demands from students and executives for customization and flexibility. Faculty-dictated curricula without the active engagement of those attending programs and courses will become increasingly problematic and unacceptable. How then will we meet the needs for responsible leadership development if student wants are driving the content? My view is that this is answered precisely through co-development. The call for business schools to engage students in setting learning needs not be synonymous with relinquishing authority and direction. Rather, it requires that we far better justify what is necessary to an increasingly mobile student with multiple options. Resource constraints that we all face mean we have to learn to collaborate better. The four realities I've just mentioned are by no means exclusive in guaranteeing the future, but they do guarantee that the future of business schools will be one of ever greater diversity. It is only through this diversity that each school will be able to give attention to the appropriate educational engagements needed to develop the kind of collaborative leaders our society so desperately need. Leaders capable of developing vision for their institutions that serve the needs of direct stakeholders while recognizing the broader societal implications. Leaders who understand how to inspire others in the pursuit of institutional goals while continually to demonstrably hold themselves accountable for the actions that their leadership induces in those they lead. Futurists and science fiction writers excitedly describe how machines will banish the drudgery of many forms of manual work and increase the opportunity for leisure and personal freedom. There seems to be little doubt that technology, and deep thinking technology in particular, has the potential to do more than replace repetitive manual labor and to generate great wealth by making many of life's necessities and luxuries even cheaper. If this is likely to take place, then we will see social transformation unlike we have experienced before, and responsible and collaborative leadership will require saving work in societies where we have made the sanctity and preeminence of work at the heart of a country's policies, economics, and social interactions. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy said, "If men have the talent to invent new machines that put men out of work, they have the talent to put those men back to work." But 2 years later, an argument was presented to President Lyndon B. Johnson that said the Cybernation revolution would create a separate nation of the poor, the unskilled, the jobless, who would be unable either to find work or afford life's necessity. I think some of the political things that have happened around the world today reflect a vast segment of societies feeling that reality in 2016. The challenge this presents for us has been brought into stark relief by these political events and decisions. We have a governance challenge that business schools need to engage with and educate for. Although as a South African, I greatly appreciated our speaker's reference to Desmond Tutu and then to them agreeing that they are prisoners of hope at the plenary session earlier on. We at business schools cannot rest on these laurels and be prisoners of hope. Our role remains developing managers and leaders who remain socially responsible throughout their careers. Individuals who undoubtedly generate wealth, but who do so while appreciating the need to close the gap in income growth between the elite and the rest, and who remain passionately concerned about systemic dislocation that occurs as the world of work continues to transform. Leaders who hold themselves responsible for mitigating this. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Minister of Finance to say a few words. Thank you.
For me, not being a specialist at all, in fact, knowing very little except for personal experience as a student in the past and a hiring manager currently about education in this current stage, let me just make a few brief reflections of what I think about the role of the business education going forward, and definitely how we see we should develop in this area. Again, I'm not working for the Ministry of Education, so my comments here are not those of the Russian government policy, but this is, as a hiring manager, as I say, I guess I have something to say. I myself graduated from a business school back in 1996, and for me it was a way to change career from government service to go to work in the investment banks, where I worked for 15 years. Finally, I returned back to the government, so that vaccine which I received in a business school didn't work for long enough. But what was important that for all of my classmates was basically all of my classmates had the one reason to go to the business school to interrupt their existing careers. It was to change what they were doing and to change their careers in a tremendous manner. At that time, the path was pretty much the same for everybody. Again, in 1996, everybody was under pressure of reading Larry's Poker. Everybody wanted to go into investment banking, so people who were studying at that time, in my class at least, were coming from various areas of human activities, all wanting to get business school education to go to work in investment banks and make millions of dollars. Now, this makes me to feel that, especially basing upon what the previous speaker has said, is that people, I think, will increasingly be looking, in my personal opinion again, increasingly be looking at business education as a way to avoid being squeezed out in this squeeze of the middle class. That people who have blue-collar or low-level white-collar jobs will be looking at trying to get business education in order to try to get into the top decile, into those 10% where earnings are higher than anywhere else. And I think that many people, this will probably be a desperate attempt to change their skills, which are becoming increasingly exempt. Again, completely agree with previous speaker. Into something which is completely new, which they hope will result in them becoming rich rather than squeezed out into becoming poor. I remember that part of my classmates were in place of Westinghouse, which at that time was producing nuclear power stations or something like this, and they all were being downsized, and as a part of their exit package, they were paid for business education. And because Westinghouse said there was no longer needing nuclear scientists, nuclear physicists, sorry, which was exactly this kind of situation. It is also interesting, I guess, that when our president was addressing the parliament in December of last year, he actually did mention a part of those things. In particular, he recalled of English workers back in the 1850s, who were breaking machines. At that time, interestingly reflected to this 1850s experience as part of this. So, yes, we and the government are also thinking about this, and the Russian government does have a major challenge of retraining workforce, the structure which inherited from the Soviet Union is still not completely changed. For example, we completely adjusted to the new realities. For example, we have a large number of this Soviet inheritance called the so-called monotowns, where there's one plant which was built for some reason by Soviet partners in some areas which are difficult to get to and difficult to live in. It costs a lot of money for the federal government to subsidize those cities which basically live producing nothing, and those people who live there, they get good education and they're good specialists, but that that work is no longer needed. And in fact, nothing else they can do is needed in that particular place. So what we need to do, we need to first retrain them, and second, relocate them to some other place, or help them relocate. Not, sorry, let me rephrase it. Not relocate people. Obviously, we're not going to take people in railway cars and move, but to pay people to move somewhere, because it's clear that the housing they have in those places is not sufficient to even pay for mortgage down payment in other places where working hands are necessary. So it is a very challenging topic for us, that a lot of professions in Russia after the collapse of Soviet Union have become, if not completely unused, but they become significantly less demand, much significantly smaller demand. The demand for them has decreased very significantly, and the pay that people were getting there has plummeted. And that, unfortunately, was true about the big army of engineers who worked in the Soviet military complex and many other professions, and those people had to actually find themselves new jobs. In many cases, unfortunately, those people found themselves jobs which required much more simple skills, such as drivers and other handwork type workers. And that is now, as we just heard and as we agree with, is becoming extinct as well. So more evolved ways of teaching people doing something new is necessary to be developed. The point is how to forecast what is not going to be done by machines. Right. Essentially, I was thinking until recently that restaurant chefs cannot be machines, but somebody told me that they may as well be machines. So I don't know. Who can tell me what job in 20 years is definitely not going to be automated? I don't know. Hopefully, government officials will be extinct as well, but that's something we probably shouldn't count on. So this is, I think that one is, again, looking at Russia, we need to, again, to the business education needs to look at how to retrain people, to not let them fall into this shrinking area of employment where their skills can be applied. But second is, it is important to, and that's, I guess, more global task, to forecast what people will need to do. Again, when I was in business school, people wants to be, people work as salespeople in investment banks, or as marketing specialists, or as managers in banks. How many of those jobs actually can be replaced by machines? Definitely, online banking is making large number of people who would call clients on a daily basis to meet clients unnecessary. This is definitely not in those quantities that is currently the case. So even though this obvious factor that if I go to business school I want to be an investment banker is no longer an obvious thing. So this is very big, I guess, very big challenge here. And final comment I'd like to make is some countries over the similar level of development with Russia, such as in particular the examples I know of, Turkey and Kazakhstan, have been sending young officials, government officials, to learn in Europe and the United States, and to bring the experience from Europe and the United States home to try to apply management practices that we learn in business schools in those countries. Now, do you think that this is something which Russia should look at? Well, it's a difficult question. It's a really difficult question, and the question is not only the one of cost, but also the question of applicability of that knowledge. I myself personally feel that the typical career path for people should be is that they graduate from university and they go from college, basically, right? They go work, do what they were trained to work, and then they make a conscious decision of go to do business education, and then go do something different or not do something different. But they have to have, I guess you cannot be completely inexperienced if you do business education. Business education is for people who have experience in working in business. And that, I think, is very important. Essentially, I think somebody working in a place like Russia should have a combination of good Russian degree and For long sort of reasons, not least because Russian legal system is different from other systems, and so on, and business environment is different, and tax and accounting system is different. So a lot of applied knowledge is different, but also because in order to apply one's knowledge at home, one has to have basic knowledge how this home works. And that, I think, is delivered in the college. And then I guess if people go to work, and then they work for a while, 3-5 years, and then maybe they venture out and go for business school. That takes a lot of investment in terms of time. Again, I'm Michael, repeating yet another thought you mentioned, that takes a lot of investment of time. My business education took 2 years. And that the country I returned to was completely different. And that was a bit of a shock. Clearly, people would want to get education which requires less investment of time, and that I guess one area which is currently developing here is online education. Doesn't mean that people will be sitting home, drinking coffee and watching their computers rather than sitting in university rooms. Well, I don't know. That's I guess a computer has not completely and will unlikely completely substitute paper books, because people will probably still want to read certain definitely books on paper. So people will probably want to come and listen to professors live in university rooms. But that definitely will save people a lot of time if they listen at home and when they want to at night or any other time on the weekends. But what I think we have is apart from this idea that young people should at some point maybe go somewhere else and see where they should learn and bring back some experience, but what needs to happen is constant education, which needs to, in my opinion, be, in my experience again as a manager, which needs to be the curriculum where it has to be put together in complete collaboration with the students, essentially, or with the managers of those students. Essentially, we want people who work and whose work cannot be replaced by machines, so whose work has to be innovative, to be on the edge of what's currently happening in the world in terms of the best experience and the best practices and the new knowledge. And therefore, essentially, people can maybe spend 1 week a year or maybe a few days a year staying and getting some updated knowledge. I think that's probably, in terms of growing people and making them more professional, is something which is the way to go. We have those programs, and I myself have to go once a year to this place to learn, and that of course is a pain, because you never find 2 days a year. But I have to, so I do, and then every time I do it is actually a very good experience, because yes, I've learned finance 20 years ago, but a lot of things have changed since. It's important to be up to date. So completing this I don't want to. Comments, let me put it this way. I'd like to say that I'm really here to listen. I was really very interested by the first speech by Mr. Page. I'm very willing to listen to what other academics have to say, because really all the challenges you mentioned are quite obvious to us as well. And well, we know the questions, right? So we'd like to get the answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yulia, could I ask you now to speak to us? And Yulia Chupina is a senior vice president at Sberbank, one of the most senior, if I may say so, female bankers in the country. So Yulia, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's always hard to speak after such distinguished academicians, and I won't be that eloquent, but I will try to give on how we see the future and what we need from the business schools, because you probably know that there was a big discussion, will the business schools survive at all? And my personal view, yes, there is a hope. But if you ask me, do they need to change? Absolutely yes. I think they need to change. And why do I think they need to change is because the organization of the future is going to be very different from what we see now. Working at a bank, which is the largest Russian bank with 300,000 employees, we're still working in a sort of very traditional bureaucratic hierarchical organization. But when we think about the future and then we envision what would be the strategy for the bank, we see that the world is changing so quickly, that it's becoming so complex and it's becoming so technology-driven that we are obliged to work in a more agile way and work much more in teams. And when we talk about teams, I mean that there are specific conditions for a team to be productive, because basically we need a team as the problems of the current work are too complex to be solved by one individual. But to work successfully in a team, it's quite difficult because we need the collaborative problem solving, we need psychological security for each member of the team to feel well to perform. We need people to be able to make mistakes and to face these mistakes rather quickly and to respond for them together as a team. We are conducting several of these experiments in Sberbank, one of them Agile, which was talked about a lot during the last year, and we have a big experiment going on with 1,000 people working in Agile teams of 10, which represent basically our retail banking and technology departments, and people are producing products and services, and we are facing that we have to learn by ourselves because there is no one, including consultants, business schools and academicians who are ready to help us in this. We are also conducting experiments with self-managed teams in our branches, in retail branches, where we delegate part of the authority because, as you probably know, in banks and in many other corporations, the decision-making become very centralized. So we send orders of how, or standards, how the things should be done in our branches, but of course it doesn't let a lot of space for creativity, for human touch. So we decided that we delegate some of the decisions to self-created teams and see how it's working. And I must say that people are not prepared for this kind of work. Part of the reasons why our corporate university is so successful is that we basically have to invent courses that we need in our work but that are not given in universities or business schools. And if we think about the skills, I can roughly put them into hard skills and soft skills. And in terms of hard skills, I would say that we are doomed to be learning technology, all of us. I'm coming from humanitarian background. I'm an interpreter and translator by my first education, and later on I got my master's degrees in US. And I never thought that at the age of more than 40 I would learn so much about IT and data as I'm learning today, to be able to do my job and not to be left out because the world has changed. So everything with data analytics, everything with innovation and major technology trend, everything about consumer experience, things like design thinking, we are teaching at our university and we are preparing these courses, and not all of the business schools, especially in Russia, are giving these courses right now. Another big group that we also find as a necessity is the so-called soft skills. And the first of them is emotional intelligence. And you're probably all familiar with how Goldman described the emotional intelligence, but roughly speaking, it's the capacity of every individual to have self-reflection, to understand very well what he's good at, what he's bad at, what he's capable to change, to put realistic plans for self-development, and to be able to have empathy, to understand the other person, to manage conflicts, to communicate, and so on and so forth. And once again, this is not taught very well at business school. So we had to take and make a mixture of different methods, different books, and try to give this basic awareness to our managers in the first place, because they need to become the team leaders. Collaborative leadership and problem solving I mentioned. I would mention another one which becomes very new, and we are only starting to think what and how we would develop programs to teach this, but basically it's vitality and energy and health. As a major employer, of course, we are thinking about the health of our employees, but we are finding a lot of connections between the emotional intelligence and the energy level of a person. Nobody is teaching this to the students. So we think that this is becoming so important that not only us, but such advanced employers like General Electric or Google or other guys, they are saying sometimes that they are more ready to take the person with the right soft skills and teach him the hard skills than to take the person with good professional skills and try to change his values and his personality and his culture, because it's much harder to do. You mentioned here that we represent the real world of work. So a couple of more ideas of how business schools can improve the education that they're giving today. I think that there should be a good mixture of academics and practitioners, because a person who is working at government or business or in business, we would never find time to make research or develop or write a sound book, but we have a lot of practical cases that may bring practical skills to the students. And if you combine it in a good way, and once again we did it in our corporate university, a lot of our courses are taught by our managers, the perception of the quality of education by our employees raised very much. And we are using it not only for our employees, but also for government education, because a lot of government bodies come to our universities, other companies, and we find a lot of relevant stuff to discuss with each other. Another idea is the project-based learning, because I think that the more you can bring the concept from idea to the execution almost stage, the better people will be prepared for the real world of work. And the last thing, I think Aleksey mentioned a very important thing. It's very, I would say, sad in my view that both in Russia and in Europe, business schools started to take people straight from the university, straight from the college, with no experience. It doesn't add at all, neither to the education in my mind, nor to the quality of them as employees for us, because I think that then people come with the practical knowledge. The discussion they're having in class is becoming much richer. So students learn not only from their teachers, but they learn from the class. So I think that US in this is doing better than us. And probably the last thing, the last idea is I think that we need to develop more business cases, especially in Russia. Because I think Aleksey mentioned one more important thing. Not all of the Western experience or Eastern experience is applicable to us. So it's very sad that we don't have a good library, maybe shared by different schools, of good business cases. Well, and maybe a couple of more ideas. You mentioned research. I would be very interested to find research on how the future education would look like, because I know that SKOLKOVO, for example, tried to look at this question, and I hope that Andrey will say something. But we have a foundation for the future of education in Sberbank, and we started it focused on the school education because we find the lack of concept on Russia, like how the education for the 21st century should look like. Because many of the concepts that I've been mentioning, and especially, for example, soft skills, are not taught at all. And I think that the business schools could be much more active players, both in foreseeing this future of education and also for thinking how to combine the traditional business school with collaborative virtual platforms that undoubtedly will be part of the future education. That's it. Thank you very much.
Well, Yulia, thank you very much for that. You just mentioned SKOLKOVO, and we have SKOLKOVO here, which is excellent. Andrey Sharonov, the Dean, there, and he will tell us all about it. Andrey.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm very sorry for being late and squeezing out Professor Myasoedov from the table, but it was not my choice. Sorry once again. If I may, I'd like to ask you to put a presentation on the screen. I'd like to talk about focus on entrepreneurship. It's the English version, yes. Okay. So I did select this topic because I guess it's a very important mission and maybe exclusive mission of business schools, and the SKOLKOVO, Moscow School of Management, has a particular experience in this issue. And let me start from these two pictures of very important and well-known historical persons. Probably Russian auditorium knows very well, or at least as much. The left person is Mr. Alexander Popov, who did invent radio and has created the first equipment, let's say, few months earlier than the right person. Right person is Guillermo Marconi. He is Italian person who also very famous as an inventor of the radio. But the small difference between these two persons is that 2 years later, Mr. Marconi got a patent. And 3 years later, he has created the first factory in Great Britain where he started to produce these first radio equipments. And this is very big difference, very important, and if I may say so, negative for Russian traditions, a contradiction between inventors and entrepreneurs. That's why I'd like to put my attention and emphasis and your attention on the importance of entrepreneurships and innovation in Russia, not only in terms of Russian economy, but also a culture and mentally. So you could compare some numbers between Russia and other countries in terms of the development of small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurship as such. You see that the share of small and medium enterprises in the Russian GDP is about 20, sometimes slightly more, sometimes even less %. And labor force, it's also close to 20%. And according to some surveys, Russians show their intentions to be entrepreneurs entrepreneurs, just in the size of 3 to 5% of the population, versus the situation in Europe, in the United States, in China, where we see that the share of the small and medium enterprises in GDP is close or even more than a half, and a number of labor job places more than 60%, and intentions close to 20%, people who would like to be entrepreneurships. It's also very, very important feature of Russian economy, and we feel this lack more seriously during crisis. During crisis, when usually small and medium enterprise sectors plays like a sponge, which we lack now. Okay, what's the problem? Who can we blame on it? There are a few reasons. It's historical background. Let me remind that during the whole Soviet history, or almost the whole Soviet history, it was a criminal activity. I mean, the entrepreneurship, and you could be punished if you would do something could be determined like entrepreneurship. Lack of competition, it's also obvious negative part of our current situation in economy, and not only in economy. Underdevelopment of institutions, and last but not least, it's a problem of values and culture, and lack of skills. And these two last particular issues, particular concerns and problems we face, that's what we are dealing now in the business school, and it's an area where the business school could make a big difference. Some interesting numbers. It comes from our research project made by SKOLKOVO Business School in last year. So we tried to compare management skills in Russia versus other countries based on LinkedIn. So in the middle, you see some common skills which were announced by participants of this network. And left and right, you see the margins, the most popular through Russians, left side, and the most popular except Russians, in other countries except Russians. And it's very interesting characteristic that in Russia you see the most preferable skills. There are corporate finance, M&A, financial modeling, due diligence, and business planning. So you see these skills dedicated to M&A, transactions, and running big enterprises, corporate finance, financial modeling, and due diligence, which is also a part of M&A process. Otherwise, you see right column, and you see the number one competence in the rest of the world. It's a leadership, which you couldn't find in the left column. It's cross-functional team building, sales, product development, and team leadership. So you see very important skills for entrepreneurship, for creation and small and medium enterprises, and it means that we could see a gap in competences, in skills, which partly could be explained the situation in the economy, the structure in the economy I mentioned in the previous slide. So how business school could foster entrepreneurship in any country, and particularly in Russia? So it's a special education programs for entrepreneurships, It's hands-on projects. Yulia mentioned the importance of project-oriented approach, and for us, it's a must for almost all corporate programs, for all corporate clients. It takes at least 30% of the course, this preparation, the real project from the agenda of CEO of the company. Mentorship, integration of corporate and entrepreneurial cultures in the class. So in some classes, particularly executive MBA classes, by the way, Yulia, I'd like to come back to your remarks on the age of MBA students, that average age of MBA students for us, it's 29 years, so it means that they have to have at least 5 years of real practice before applying to the business school, which is important, and I agree with you. So in some classes of executive MBA, we have 60% of owners of business, 60%, while, for example, in Harvard, it's 5%, 5 to 7% average amount of owners in the executive MBA class, and 40% managers. So it creates very good mixture, good combination, which allows to share experience, both corporate and from entrepreneur environment. Global context and alumni community, which is also very, very important. So in some practical results, finally, I'd like to share you with information about our so-called regional programs. It's a startup academy. It's 9 weeks program for startuppers who would like just to kick off their own project. It's not yet a business, and we help them just to prepare their pitch, their project, and to be presented for investors, for other startuppers. It's a practicum, SKOLKOVO practicum. It's for small and medium enterprises who would like to scale their business, who are thinking about export. It's also a very important feature and observation that the share of export from small and medium enterprises in the Russian export structure is miserable comparatively with Europe, and particularly with China. For example, in Russian export to China, the share of small and medium enterprises is 0.1%. And the share of Chinese small and medium enterprises in the export to Russia is 60%. Could you compare? So it's also a characteristic of our economy and skills and intentions people have. And we just kicked off a few months ago the Startup Academy Junior. It's a first program for teenagers from 13 to 16 years old. It's pupils from schools where during 1 week we involve them in the world of entrepreneurship. Corporate programs focused on entrepreneurship, and I'm proud to mention that we got the silver award of EFMD last year for the particular program with Rosatom. It's Russian State Nuclear Energy Corporation. The name of this program was Management of Technological Innovation. So it's a real in-company entrepreneurship where people deal with innovations. We have probably the biggest community of mentors in the SKOLKOVO Business School, and particularly SKOLKOVO alumni community, and we have 180 pairs of mentor and project in our community. Executive MBA, as I mentioned, 50 to 15, sometimes 60 to 40 between owners and top managers. international modules in MBA and executive MBA programs and partnership with Yale and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology as an international exposure and as an exposure to entrepreneurship and innovation in Silicon Valley in particular. By the end of the day, we have 30% of alumni who, after the school, set up a new business. So that's how do we see our mission to develop the spirit and the environment favorable to entrepreneurship in Russia. Thank you.
Well, Andrey, thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to invite Tim Mescon to talk to us. Tim is the European, I believe, Middle East and Africa representative of AACSB.
This one?
Yes.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Sir Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you again, and a great honor to be here, Sergey, as a small part of Gaidar. When I think about collaborative leadership, I think where I spent the last week, and that was visiting business schools in Turkey. And if ever there was a need for deans and for their faculty and for the universities to practice collaborative leadership, now is the time, and Turkey is the country. And I was so very impressed. I met with 45 business school deans in a country with about 190 or so universities, and I was encouraged by their commitment, by their spirit, by their focus on what they do, and understanding how complicated their context is, and the need to stay focused and future-oriented in supporting the millions and millions of students that they educate. When I think about what was called uniting leaders or collaborative leaders, I think ethical, value-driven, responsible, team builders, and collaborative in what they do and how they do it. And actually, I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing in business schools across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, where we have 400 members today. And I want to share some of the innovation, the engagement, and the impact, all focused on collaborative leadership, and how enthused I am about the quality of work and the evolution of curriculum and programs that's taking place in business schools today. Let me start with today's, if I might, today's business environment. To no one's surprise, I think these words capture the challenge, both for business and for business education. It is indeed global today, and I want to recognize two of the young students who have helped me during this visit. Daniel, who's a third-year student who is absolutely focused on his studies of the Chinese language and Chinese culture and Chinese business, and becoming incredibly agile and adept in those studies. And Artur, first-year student, who took last year off, went to Munich, where he spent a year to perfect his German language skills, and now is back at IBS. And this is the kind of global agility and flexibility that that is going to make for successful graduates moving forward. And I think, as Yulia mentioned, that business schools also acknowledge that they're in a competitive context today, not just competing with each other, but competing with this universe of 2,000 corporate universities worldwide that are moving at lightning speed in responding to their own needs in real time. So the challenge for business schools is enormous. And yet, as I said, I'm encouraged because I think many are responding to that challenge. We just went through an 18-month visioning process that encompassed three things. First, the shifting roles of management in society, and I would like to say management and leadership in society. Second, the evolving expectations of business education today, and I think it's placing huge demands on business schools, many of which are rising to the occasion. And then, of course, the notion of emerging opportunities for business schools. And so out of this visioning process came 5 opportunities for business education, and I believe this captures the spirit of the transformation that's taking place in business schools today, and I'd like to talk about each of these, if I might. The first is that business schools must be catalysts for innovation, powering business creation and economic development, and that's the collaboration with the greater world, with the societies in which we operate, through, as we just heard, through entrepreneurship and through innovation. And I am incredibly encouraged by the activities that I'm seeing in business schools in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa focused on this notion of innovation. I wanted to share with you just 3 brief examples. We ran a global competition around innovation, and I'd like to share with you 3 examples. Example 1, which responds to these specific questions that we as panelists were given. This first example touches on this positive impact at the regional, national, and university level, and the second about collaborative leadership. And this first example I love. It's from Lancaster University Management School in the UK. And as you can see, if you go to the last bullet, this single initiative has created over 4,500 jobs in the UK. And what did they do? They collaborated with the government in the UK to create 15 growth hubs, creating jobs and driving local economic growth. How did they collaborate? 17 enterprise partnerships, 42 higher education institutions, and 200 businesses collaborated on this initiative that was driven by a £32 million initial investment by the UK. This is business education at work. Example 2, from the Asia Pacific region, Massey University at the University of New Zealand. You know, one of the great concerns about research in business schools today is that nobody reads it. Nobody understands it. And in many cases, it's academics speaking to academics. So what did they do at Massey? They conducted a research translation competition where they challenged their own professors to write summaries of the impact of their current research for business people. So in addition to the articles they publish in peer-reviewed journals, it was, can you translate this to the world of practice and the world of work? And it's been enormously successful. And the third example, if you want to talk about collaborative leadership and you want to talk about impact, I want you to see via technology what one of the largest universities in the world has done, and that is the UK's Open University. What have they done? They've designed, every time now, they design a new study module, which is a course in their curriculum. Every new course, 5% of the content is provided as a free online learning resource. Now, it's on their Open Learn platform, but it's also on iTunes, on YouTube, on Biblio, and on Google Play, available for the world at large at no charge. Through a partnership with the BBC, they co-produce radio and television programs that are available collaboratively to the world at large. And finally, they've developed Future Learn, which is on the MOOC platform that's owned by the OpenU, which provides free, custom-produced online courses on a wide variety of business topics. Now, if you want to look at leveraging technology in the spirit of collaborative learning, this is as good an example as I've ever seen. So this word cloud around new approaches and embracing risk and this notion of connecting people, if you will, with ideas. Because we believe that business schools today must be co-creators of knowledge. Not the sole creators, not the only creators, but co-creators in the ecosystem, with engineering schools, with technology schools, with medicine, with the sciences, and with the humanities, and with the arts, to encourage rigor in theory and application. But business schools, the best business schools, we believe, are co-creators of this knowledge. Third, we believe that business education today and business schools are in fact a hub of lifelong learning. That it's just not for bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and professional education, but it is for professionals along the continuum of their careers. And it looks something like this. But what it says is we're never, ever done. That we're constantly reinventing education, we're reinventing delivery, we're reinventing connecting with various stakeholders, and that great business schools play a very critical role in that through many of these initiatives that you see. And next, we believe, fourth, that business education today is part of the dialogue of leading on leadership. Now, leadership development, leadership education certainly does not only take place in business schools, but we believe that business schools and business education play a pivotal role in creating environments that nurture and train leaders. And what an exciting initiative this is at Harvard with the Bloomberg Foundation, $32 million gift by Bloomberg for Harvard to help train and develop mayors of cities and their senior aides to enhance public sector management and innovation. Sergey, very similar to much of the work that's being done right here at IBS. And these elements play a great role in that. And finally, we believe business education today must be an enabler, an incubator for global prosperity. And you've heard many of my fellow panelists talk about this, but we believe It is, in fact, the vision of our organization that we are to enable, we are to foster, we are to foment global prosperity. And we think business schools in different ways, in different regions of the world, can play a critical role in developing prosperity. What does this connect to? You're all familiar with the Millennium Development Goals at the United Nations, which were first released 17 years ago, and 189 countries became signatories. But what's next, and tied to this notion of enhancing global prosperity, are the Sustainable Development Goals with an eye on 2030, and we think that business education plays a critical role in supporting these. Through partnerships, through collaborative leadership, through leveraging supply chain, and supporting these in different ways in different regions of the world. Because we believe that business schools and business education can be a force for good. That business has an important role to play in that, as does business education. Trust today is at the highest levels it's been in the last 80 years, and that says a lot about what's happening in business schools and in businesses worldwide. And we think, as part of this, that great business schools today will play a critical role as a force for good around the world. So thank you for your time, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and we look forward to your questions.
All right, the Minister has to leave us now, but thank you, Minister, very much. He had a phone call. I don't know how close to the top the phone call was from, but he obviously has to go. So thank you very much. We now come to Danica Purg from Bled. Slovenia, yes, it is.
This evening from Slovenia.
Bled is where she's from.
I don't mind, it's a small country, you know, so.
This one, yes.
Yes. And then, and what is this? Yeah. Thank you very much. Now my challenge is how to make everything what I plan to say in 5 minutes, and I shall try to do it. I got a task to talk about how to become uniting leaders within business, state, society, cooperation, and I shall say something about that. How shall I say, in some statements. Do we have a choice? Here I'm showing you Moscow, but I shall show you the other picture. This is Bled, where is the school that I'm leading, and where is CEEMAN head office, Bled. So I wanted to say that the school don't have any choice whether to be the unifying factor or not. The reasons for that, I have to say that they were always, in fact, business schools were having a unifying function. I feel that there is the difference among business schools that exist because of the needs of the business, like the school that I lead, and the others that were, you know, the ones that were asked to be by Chamber of Commerce, etc. And many in Eastern Central Europe were asked to support the reform processes. And this is one of the main misunderstandings, I believe, between us and the schools that were established 100 years ago, because we are still much more focusing on change management, much more focusing on supporting the reform processes in our society, and less interested in the research, although also there we are catching up. I have to say that business schools should develop managers and leaders that are responsible for organizations and people who take care that deliver goods and services, contribute to the welfare and well-being of people. They are daily confronted with dilemmas about short-term and long-term results, about quality and profit, technical innovations, employment, and the location of their activities. It is impossible for business schools to fulfill this development function without being integrated in the business and society. Here we see the important contribution and support of PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education Initiative. A business school that is prepared for the future offers two different services, high-tech and high-touch. Schools have to be properly equipped in order to be able to take advantage of the telecommunications and online opportunities. This requires a high-tech infrastructure that makes it possible to be connected globally with providers and users of services. The purpose of educators will be selecting relevant materials, mentoring, moderating, and interacting professionally with individual students and groups. On the other hand, we have to offer the infrastructure for high touch. The need for high touch will grow with the complexity of the business society and society in general. Managers and leaders will be increasingly dependent on their intuition, imagination, and creativity. The need for retraining, reflection, counseling, and advising will grow. And I was pleased to listen to the lady, to the Vice President of Sberbank, because we are having this in the school. We have the reflection sessions. We have the sessions on emotional intelligence. We have the sessions on vitality, etc. So we are, we are differentiating us on that. Business schools have to respond with serving managers and leaders outside of their busy, often stressful daily environments. This asks for five-star hotel-like environment. And we are trying to do that. And if you ask me at the end, is this a sketch for the future? I would say, no, this is a sketch of today. If you feel that you are not prepared for it, either in mindset or in practice, hurry up, you are lagging behind. Thank you.
Right, and now last but not least, and thank you, 4 minutes, 30 seconds, Anissa, very good. Eric, see if you can beat that. Eric Cornuel, last but not least, representative of EQUIS.
What?
No. EFMD, excuse me, EFMD.
This is a bit more than EQUIS.
Yes, EFMD.
Yes?
And EQUIS. Right.
Yes,
He's French,
mine.
so don't worry.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, fortunately we are more than just accreditation, otherwise that would be so boring. Okay, so the topic of the forum, actually was more or less divided between two kinds of ideas, because we did not necessarily get the same topic. But let me try to talk about my part, collaborative leadership and impact towards society, business, and Sergey, you remember the third one? Government. No, it was just to make sure that he was still awake, because after such long presentations, I want to make sure that everybody is up to par. So, last year, you remember, for those who were here when I made my presentation, that, yeah, but we don't see it. Can't you reduce a little bit the intensity of the light? Here you have the Harry Potter castle. And you remember I spoke about the Harry Potter castle, because it's pretty much like academia in the past. Academia and business schools, we created and delivered knowledge within walls, if you want, within closed walls, so only for a minority of participants. So this was part of our tradition, and step by step we improved that, thanks in particular to digitalization. So you can draw a parallel with opera. Indeed, opera has been revitalized partly thanks to the so-called three-tenor band, you remember, formed in the 90s. And you recognize here Luciano Pavarotti, José Carreras, and Placido Domingo. They performed a very pluralistic way of an approach of opera, and they used large venues, etc. You know, very, very different way to perform opera music, and they definitely contributed to popular appreciation of great composers like Mozart, Chopin, and plenty of others. We can really say that they had a big impact on society through their own means, and they did cooperate very well with each other. Similarly, if we want to cooperate and have an impact on business, government, and society, the obvious is indeed to integrate to our curricula research and preoccupations, social sciences, humanities, science, and technology, and to try to have a more holistic approach of our role in training participants and in doing research. In a way, develop integrative thinkers able to deal with hard concepts, but also to improvise. Improvisation some years ago was considered as rubbish, but today very often we are obliged to improvise because of the complexity of the environment, or make difficult decisions with deep integrity. This, of course, means to forget about the silo-oriented approach. Are we doing it, you think, in our schools today? Of course, some schools are doing it, but most of them don't do it. We still teach students through disciplines. Research is highly specialized, and cross-discipline research is regarded as rubbish. We have a very well-oiled model. It works very, very well. Wow, my presentation is moving forward the wrong way. Sorry. That's bad. So we have a very well-oiled model, as I said. We train participants by disciplines and techniques, and we produce hypothetico-deductive and axiomatic research based on the same format for decades. If you take strategic management, my topic, you look at articles, the structure is always the same and has been the same for decades. We are excellent at production and execution, but not really for innovation and experimentation. In a certain way, to mirror the evolution of societies, we need a paradigm shift. And you already saw the slide with Mr. Kuhn, Thomas Kuhn, who wrote the structure of scientific revolutions. And he has studied this structure very thoroughly, and he was of the opinion that this change takes a lot of time due to the resistance of the barons, if you want, of the so-called normal science, the people who want research to be limited to 46 articles in the Financial Times, for instance, this kind of people. And a complete shift may only occur when all these barons have retired. And you may also know Paul Feyerabend. Paul Feyerabend has an approach even more radical. He felt that everything was good and that we should go full range to be able to understand the complexity of the world. So we are, of course, in the middle of many questionings coming from ourselves. I mean, business schools are questioning themselves. And they are, in my opinion, a symptom of this slow evolution, but we should be proud that we are indeed questioning ourselves. Some other professions are not at all questioning themselves. Look, for instance, at the financial markets. I was recently in London, and a friend of mine who was in the financial system told me that 2008 is completely forgotten. People don't take any responsibility for what happened on the financial markets that destroyed so much value for ordinary people. So, building on that and looking at different important parts of society, there are many reasons to worry. So I'm not as optimistic as my friends seated here. And we are surrounded by people who don't do what they preach and don't question themselves. And this is this slide. So on this slide, talking about business, because it's one of the people on which we're part of the society on which we want to have an impact. If you see Mr. Winterkorn here, Mr. Winterkorn did not tell the truth on the real level of pollution of his cars, Volkswagen, and you know the level of the scandal today. Talking about politics, Mr. Nigel Farage in the middle, one day after the Brexit referendum, said, well, all what we have promised might not necessarily be feasible. Talking about society at large, I can't resist to have a photo of this gentleman, Ronaldo. He has apparently hidden more than 150 million euros in tax havens, as if he had not enough to live. Well, but of course, the perfect example of all this comes from the late French politician Edgar Faure, who said once, promises are binding only for those receiving them. And I think it perfectly encapsulates all these elements together. So here we are beyond a mechanical answer to the issue, since we are facing human nature. The point is not the mechanics behind it, it's the behavior of people, what is behind human nature. So I don't think that without a global philosophical shift and an agreed global governance, we will be able really to change the deal. I'm afraid that we, as business school, will have a hard time to make a difference. Paul I think you quote Darwin, Paul, at the beginning, at the end of your speech. So I think I have also to do that. I can't resist because it's a very good one. You certainly remember that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So us, the business schools, we are certainly not the strongest. We can see that every day. We are perhaps not the most intelligent either. So let's try to be adaptable to change by continuing to question ourselves, which again, the other ones are not necessarily doing, questioning our role in society and our future. Through this approach, we may be able to better cooperate with business, government and society, and eventually influence them, if we want to be realistic, a bit. Thank you very much.
All right, Eric, thank you very much. It's now just about 5:20. Well done. You've been a very patient audience. It's not easy being a... You can't get the speakers nowadays who'll keep to time, unfortunately. That's the trouble. But we're doing okay. We've got till 6:30 until they throw us out. So we'll have a 10-minute break. If you could all be back here at 5:30 English time, not 5:30 Russian time, that would be much appreciated. And we'll start then with another 7 wonderful people to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sir Paul, for the great work you've done, and I'd like to thank on behalf of RANEPA to all the outstanding speakers. And just as an information, now several fantastic practitioners from business with predominantly Western education would be speaking about the problems of business education in the next part. So we're looking forward to see you in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. That's it.